Good afternoon. There are some moments in history that are so large, so impactful, that the leaders of the church must speak about them in order to provide pastoral guidance and in order to secure the integrity of our witness. This is one of those moments, and so I am delivering a special word to you today about the events of the past week. 2 days ago, on Wednesday, on the 6th of January 2021, thousands of supporters of President Trump marched on the Capitol building, attacked it, and breached it in an attempt to force Congress to overturn the results of a valid election and keep Trump in power. What can we call it? It was a riot. It was an insurrection. It was terrorism. The president's supporters assaulted police officers, they vandalized, they looted. They waved the Confederate battle flag and other white nationalist emblems alongside flags that said, "Jesus saves." They prayed that God would keep Trump in power, and they did Nazi salutes. One of the attackers was killed by Capitol Police, 3 died of medical emergencies, and 1 Capitol Police officer was so badly injured that he died today. Countless others were injured. It could have been worse if this insurrection had not been so stupid and incompetent, if they had been organized in any way or had any serious plan other than to express their anger through destruction and violence. The attack was as pitiable as it was dangerous, and thankfully it failed. But what if they had caught, say, Nancy Pelosi in her office? What if they had cornered Democratic congressional staffers? We all saw the scaffold they built in front of the Capitol with its nooses. Many of the crowd were very explicit that they wanted to use this scaffold to kill members of Congress who refused to keep Trump in power. There were patriots on Capitol Hill, the quick-thinking staffers who secured the Electoral College vote certificates, the members of both parties who stood up for our constitutional democracy and ensured the congressional certification of the vote. But there were no patriots in that mob. There is blame to go around. Of course, the terrorists themselves are to blame for what they did. We rightly hope they will be brought to justice for their crimes. But they were incited and directed by President Trump, who told them to march on the Capitol, who told them to fight, and who has inflamed their rage for weeks with his lies about election fraud. Mr. Trump's allies in the conservative media, Fox News, Breitbart, Newsmax, Rush Limbaugh, Mark Levin, and so many others. They also deserve blame for amplifying these lies about the election. The president's allies in Congress, such as Josh Hawley and Ted Cruz, also deserve blame for legitimizing these lies in their attention-seeking ploy to slow down or hinder the transfer of power. Those who have enabled the Trump for years, including many Christian leaders, deserve blame for this. They abandoned their principles for him, and now are left with nothing to show for it. I can only join with the vast majority of Americans, including both Democrats and very many Republicans, to condemn the actions of all of these people. But it is not enough to condemn these actions. We must also consider the beliefs, habits, and impulses that fueled these events. The Trump movement has a few core beliefs, habits, and impulses. This movement is a group of mainly white, conservative, Christian men who believe that anything that gives their group power over perceived enemies is right and good. Any belief that justifies their actions to keep or take power is true. Any action or person that would hinder or prevent their power over their enemies is evil. Any criticism of them or their leader must be false. Last, they believe that Mr. Trump is the unique vehicle by which their power can be secured. Now, these are not core conservative principles any more than they are liberal principles, but they are at the core of the Trump movement. They are at the core of very much of what Trump and his followers have done in the last 4 years. And we can see this way of thinking at play in this attack. It was an attack fueled by a desperate need for power over enemies, fueled by lies and by a worldview that is built upon lies, animated by lies, and sustained by lies. What do we say about this as Christians? I suppose some might want to sit back and say, who knows what really happened? Who knows if it was good or bad? But that is to play the role of Pilate, who could not take a stand for what was right, who refused to recognize the truth that stood before him. Very clearly, we can no longer tolerate this way of thinking and feeling and behaving. We can no longer tolerate this movement of lies. Christian participation in this movement has already left our credibility in tatters. The church must now condemn this movement with one voice. We should have done this a long time ago, and many in the church did, but not enough. This way of thinking, feeling, and behaving, it's not the way Christ has taught us. The way of Christ is the way of the cross, the way of accepting suffering for the sake of truth, not inflicting suffering on others for the sake of lies. We are meant to look like the crucified one, not the mob that demanded his blood. Denunciation is a start. We must tell the truth about what happened with moral clarity. But I think we ought to do more. It is the bare minimum to denounce lies and to denounce violence. We must also be active in our pursuit of honesty, of peace, and of a just social order. The church must become an oasis of honesty, a place in which we come to be healed of our tendencies to lie and to believe convenient lies, in which we come to be healed of our desire for power at the expense of others. The church in far too many corners has not looked like this in the past 5 years. But now we hardly have a choice. Our country cannot go on like this. And if we wish for a better world, we can hardly avoid our responsibility to take on the hard work of making peace and healing.